Hello, my name's Kyle, and for the remainder of this training, we'll be taking the character that Justin has already taught you how to create in ZBrush, and I'll be walking you through the process of adding lights, materials, and textures, as well as rendering and compositing the final image using Maya. So let's go ahead and begin this process by taking the geometry that Justin has already exported out of ZBrush, and we'll start to bring those back into Maya. So for this process, let's go to File, and Import. And before I actually start to import the geometry, let's take a look inside the import options, because there are a few options found in here that we do need to enable. For the file type, we'll make sure this is set to an OBJ file. And also, all the way down at the very bottom, we want to make sure that the Create Multiple Objects checkbox is turned off. So that way, if we do have any geometry that has been split apart by ZBrush during the export process, we can make sure that by disabling this, that those pieces of geometry get brought back into Maya as one single piece of geometry, which is what we want. So now let's go to Import. And if we take a look inside the Project Files /OBJ folder that Justin has exported all the OBJ files to, we can start to now bring these back in. So we can start with any of these that we want. In our case, something like the Drool A piece of geometry, and if we press A on our keyboard, we can actually frame in on all of our scene. You can see here's the initial piece of geometry here. Alright, so from this point forward, it's just a process of continuing to bring these in. So there's Drool B. Let's actually make sure we go to Import. Drool C, there we go. So we do have to do these pieces of geometry one at a time. So there's the eye. There's the right eye. Alright, so I'll go ahead and just import a couple more pieces, and then we'll go ahead and jump to a process or jump to a point where we can have all of these already imported in. So there's the fish eye. That one came in on the opposite side of the fish, so we really can't see that, but it did come in. So there's the other eye. So I'm going to go ahead and just pause this for a moment while we get the rest of the geometry brought in. Alright, so I've gone ahead and now just imported the rest of the geometry. Really, it's just the same exact process, so no reason to necessarily have you sit here and watch me import the geometry time after time. Now, let's take a look at what we've got here. Now, you'll see that the geometry itself has these really hard normals that have been applied to it, and that's just a result of the OBJ import. So if we want to fix that, all we have to do is just select all our geometry, make sure we're in the Polygons menu, and we'll just go to Normal and soften these edges. There we go, much better. Now, one of the things that I do want to mention is that if you take a look at our actual geometry in comparison to the Maya grid, you can see that our geometry is very large. Alright, so really, as far as the actual rendering of this goes, if this geometry is really going to be this large in relation to the overall Maya grid, this is really just going to be indicative that this is going to be a very large piece of geometry. So whenever we start to set up the lights and the materials and things like that, this object is going to appear to be very colossal. This is going to be something that looks like a 50 or 100 foot squid. So what I want to do is take all the pieces of geometry that we have, let's group these together, and I actually just want to take these and start to scale these down. So that way, whenever I start to render and start to apply things like subsurface scattering, we can start to get the appearance of an object that is a little bit smaller. Now, this will start to play some problems with the actual displacement maps that Justin has exported, but we'll start to take a look at some ways that we can start to get around that. Alright, so we'll scale this down to some kind of an arbitrary value. In my case, it looks like we're at about 1, 2, 3, 4 Maya units from the ground to the top of this squid's head. Alright, so we'll use that as the starting point. And you can see now the geometry is much smaller than what we had before. So now that we have this, let's just press up on our keyboard. And let's now ungroup these. And the reason I'm going to do that is because you can see that now on each piece of geometry there is now a scale value that has been applied to this. Now, this can sometimes mess up certain mental ray shaders, so once we ungroup everything, let's make sure that we now go to Modify and then Freeze Transformations. All right, so that will now zero everything out. Now everything's scale is set back to 1, and now we can start to get some nice translucent effects, especially whenever we start to add things like subsurface scattering. This will be now much, much easier to control with this smaller piece of geometry. Alright, now one thing that I do want to do just before I wrap up this lesson is if we take a look inside the Hypershade, you can see that we do have now a lot of these material nodes that have been brought in. Basically, each piece of geometry has come in with its own material node. Now, we really don't need to have all of these. So what I'm going to do is just select all of our geometry, look for the default Lambert 1. We'll just assign that material. There we go. And now we can just go to Edit and Delete Unused Nodes. And that'll now clear out everything in here that we're not using and just start to really get our scene nice and streamlined. So really we only just have 3 shaders, which are the 3 default shaders that we should have. Alright, so now that we have the geometry that has been brought in, it's now been sort of optimized and now resized, and we've gotten rid of a lot of these junk material nodes that we don't necessarily need anymore. So now we can begin the process of starting to now add some lights and some additional materials. So we'll begin that process in the next lesson.